Welcome back to A Numbers Game with Ryan Girdusky. Thank you guys for being here. Ladies and gentlemen, I have so much data to go over from the last week. It is new census data on births. It's the Wisconsin and Georgia elections. It's Mayor Mamdani's new anti-white agenda that he's pushing forward, and how it fits into the modern-day Democratic Party. Let's get straight into it. So first, on the new birth data out from the CDC for February of 2026. Now, I want to remind you, it is preliminary data, so it's subject to change, but it is a big indicator because it's not going to change by that much. And it's an indicator on a number of policy fronts, especially immigration. I have said on this podcast time and time again that birth data is a lagging indicator for immigration data. Basically, if you're an illegal alien and you're pregnant in February, January, March of 2025, you're not going to deport on your own. You're not going to self-deport because you want to have a baby who becomes an American citizen who's an anchor. And in 18 years, that anchor baby can sponsor you for a green card and for residency and eventually for citizenship. As time goes on, though, and Trump's policies are enacted, the number of women who were pregnant when he first got into office dwindles, and because they have their baby, and then the number of new pregnant women diminishes if he's effectively carrying out mass deportation or self-deportation, right? And we're going to see that as months and months go by in his own administration. So, from the CDC data, every major group of immigrants who usually give birth to large populations, I'm talking 1,000 or more children per month, have seen a double-digit decline in the February 2026 numbers in comparison to 2025. Among Chinese immigrants, it's down 17.5%. Among Colombians, 10.5%. Ecuadorians, negative 22%. El Salvadorians, negative 15%. Guatemalans, negative 16%. Haitians, negative 16%. Hondurans, negative 15%. And Mexicans, the largest group, negative 13%. The only group with large populations who give birth to more than 1,000 children a month in America that didn't really see a decline were Indians, Cubans, and Venezuelans. With the immigration crackdown, the U.S. fertility rate has dropped to 1.57 children per woman. Now, remember, you need 2.1 children per woman to meet replacement levels. So we are under replacement levels, but we are far ahead of most of Europe, of most of Asia, of Australia, of South America. I mean, we're really, for an advanced country, we're up with the higher levels of fertility rates. Now, aside from American Indians, Native Americans, and Native Hawaiians, all other races and ethnicities saw their numbers decline from February 2025 to February 2026, their raw numbers of births. This is especially true of Black Americans. The decline of Black Americans, as far as birth rates go, is staggering. It's one of the cultural phenomenons that no one is really talking about in the mainstream media or in conservative media. And they kind of question, I mean, conservatives especially run to the issue of abortion because Blacks do have more abortions and they abort more babies than any other demographic. It's not that simple, though, right? Because abortion was much higher in the 90s and 2000s, and the number of states having easier access to abortion where there's a large Black predominant population, like the Deep South, abortion was much more easily available then, even 5 years ago, than it is today, because with the overturning of Roe v. Wade and states enacting strict abortion restrictions. Part of the reason, and this is a good, valid thing that has happened in our culture, the amount of teen pregnancies and women who are having children as teenagers has declined by over 95% in the Black community over the last 20 years. When I was growing up, I mean, it was very common for someone to have a teen pregnancy. It wasn't that kind of, much of a weird thing. It wasn't like everyone was doing it, but it wasn't uncommon at all, especially among the Black community where it was the largest. The number of teen pregnancies and teen births has declined substantially, which is also, by the way, why adoption has become so much harder in this country. I have so many friends who are trying to adopt a baby, and with foreign countries really cracking down on foreign adoption and the number of teen pregnancies declining, I mean, I have friends waiting for an adoption for 3, 4 years. It's very difficult to find women wanting to give a baby up for adoption. Anyway, that's not even there. But that's one of the main reasons why the Black fertility rate has dropped. The other reason, and this is going less, less talk, even less talked about on the subject that's almost never talked about is the number of Black women who are going to college. College is the number one thing that delays birth, right? If a woman goes to college and is going to complete a college, especially a master's degree or a PhD, they are likely not having a child well into their mid 30s. And the number who forego ever having a baby declines substantially. The population of Black women going to college has exploded exponentially in the last 10, 15 years. And that has a lot to do with why the birth rates are falling. 2025 was the first year where there was a significant gap in the white fertility and the Black fertility, with whites having a lot more children on average per woman. This is always measured per woman, nothing against the men, but like we don't count. We don't count. It's per woman. The number of babies per woman is substantially higher among white women than among Black women. It's all very, very fascinating. So whites made up 50.7% of all births in February 2026. This is a big change from the last 3 years, where whites overall have been a minority. It's a plurality, but it's like 49, 49.8, 48% of births, back up to 50.7. It might happen where whites are a majority of births again for the first time in 2 years, because their fertility rate is declining at the slowest level in comparison to Asians, Hispanics, and Blacks. If you look at birth rates combining January 2026 and February 2026, whites made up 49.6% of all births. That's up 0.9% from the year prior. Blacks have gone from 13.1 to 12.5. Native Americans have gone from 0.6 to 0.7. Asians have gone from 6.3 to 6.3. It's a small decline. It's like 6.36 to 6.30. Multiracials have gone from 2.65 to 2.7, and Latinos have gone down from 27.2% of all children being born to 26.7. It is likely, I'm going to guess, that it is going to be likely that we're going to see the number of Black children being born in this country hitting under 12%, maybe next year, maybe the year after, certainly in the next 2 to 3 years, the way things are going, if things continue. And if it gets down to 10%, I mean, we're talking about the lowest levels in more than 100 years as far as the percentage of births go. Overall, the white fertility rate is 1.54 children per woman. That's up by 0.1, 1.54 up from 1.53. Black fertility rate went from 1.5 to 1.44, and Latinos went from 1.93 to 1.86. They have the highest, but it's not at replacement levels. If this continues going forward, we are seeing the number of states where Blacks make up the largest portion of minority births decreasing and decreasing and decreasing. We are almost at the stage, we're probably like maybe a year or 2 years away from Maryland and Arkansas having more Latino children being born than more Black children. It's really a handful of states. And outside of the Deep South, it's just Ohio, Michigan, West Virginia, and Minnesota and Maine, and Vermont too. And Minnesota and Maine is really because of the Somalian community. It's not because of American Blacks. It's really fascinating. Okay, let's talk about Georgia and Wisconsin. That was the state. Wisconsin, they had special elections. Well, Wisconsin was a special election. It's just a spring election. They had it for the state Supreme Court, where the Republican-backed candidate Maria Lazar suffered one of the worst defeats for any Republican in the state's history, especially in the last several decades, losing by more than 20 points. Meanwhile, in Georgia's 14th district, this is the old Marjorie Taylor Greene district. She gave up when she retired from Congress. Republican Clay Fuller defeated Democrat Sean Harris by 12 points. This is a victory for Republicans, but it's a 25-point swing away from Republicans in the 2024 election. A shockingly large swing, the largest of any House special election we have seen. So what happened? Let's talk about what happened. First, there was a very low turnout. Wisconsin was shockingly low. I mean, surprisingly low, given how many people have been engaged in other recent off-year elections. In Wisconsin, the liberal-backed candidate won by fewer votes than the conservative candidate lost by in 2025. In 2025, the conservative Republican-backed candidate lost by 11 points, but received 1.06 million votes. In this election, the Democrat won by 20 points and received 900,000 votes, 150,000 fewer votes than the Republican lost by last time. So a lot of Republicans stayed home. We've seen this song and dance over and over. They are not engaged and they stayed home, especially these low propensity Republicans. There's no other way of saying it. However, that doesn't tell the whole story. Portions of the Trump coalition are leaving the GOP. People who were not diehard Republicans in the 2024 election, namely Latinos, young people, low income voters, voters who make less than $50,000 a year. So in Dade County, Georgia, this is a perfect example. The Republican candidate won 2,007 votes to the Democratic candidate's 910 votes. Obviously, a big win for the Republican as far as percentages go. When you compare that with the 2022 governor's race, Brian Kemp won that county 4,900 votes to 807. So it's not just that Republicans aren't showing up. Democrats are gaining more votes than they even gain in regular elections. Why? Independents, low-income voters, as I said, Latinos, loose members of the Trump coalition, people who had voted for Trump was the first Republican they'd ever cast a ballot for. They're kind of pissed. They're furious, and they're willing to swing the other way. This is the double hate voters. These are the voters who kind of, if things aren't going right, they will ditch the team in 5 seconds. And we're losing that part of the coalition, us as Republicans. Democratic listeners, I'm sure you're feeling very good about this, but the Republican listeners, which is the majority of my audience, you're probably not. On top of that, Democrats are voting in high numbers. Get this, take this. The progressive candidate, the Democrat-backed candidate for the state Supreme Court in Wisconsin, received a higher share of the vote in downtown Madison, Wisconsin, than Bashir al-Assad received in the Syrian presidential election. That's the fake election where he, as a dictator, says he wins all these votes. He actually performed worse in Syria than the Democrat did in Madison, Wisconsin. In the majority Latino precincts in Dalton, Georgia, it's a 77% Latino area. Harris won that area by 20 points. The Democrat running for Congress won it by 73 points. Now, obviously, this is a lot of it's to do with turnout, immensely low turnout. But those who are engaged are the Democrats, Latinos. They are hyper engaged. The Republican Latinos are either maybe swinging one way or the other, or are completely dismissive of the entire election cycle. They are angry. These types of voters that were supporting Trump and Trump won the popular vote with their support, they are mad, especially about the economy. The economy is the number one issue. They also don't like the war in Iran. They don't like the high gas prices. They don't like the negative PR that's coming from the ICE raids. However, it's coupled, that could be sustainable, but it's coupled with low propensity turnout from Republicans and high turnout from Democrats. It's a perfect storm for Democrats this November. Parts of the Trump coalition need to be re-engaged. Something has to change very, very quickly, like immediately. And I think that's really why the ceasefire that President Trump did with Iran and trying to reduce gas prices and increase in the stock market was so prescient, because he realizes this coalition is fracturing. He's in worse position polling wise than he was after January 6th over the economy, over gas prices. Everything else is, bothering some of these voters, but they've taken a backseat to the economy. Once again, things need to change to prevent a Democratic bloodbath this November. Okay, we're going to go next to the New York City's new anti-white discriminatory policies Mayor Mamdani is pushing. That's coming up next. Mayor Mamdani announced a new racial equity plan for New York City residents.
And while today's true cost of living measure confirms that the affordability crisis touches every corner of our city, we know that these effects are not applied evenly. So often, it is black and brown New Yorkers who are hit the hardest. This preliminary racial equity plan is the first step in developing a whole-of-government approach to tackling that reality. It is a plan that lays out these first steps to solve decades of neglect and discrimination, and it places the work of 45 city agencies within a singular framework.
Okay. Mayor Mamdani goes on to say that, quote, the wealth of the median white household in the city is more than $200,000, while the black household is less than $20,000. We are reckoning with the long history of racism here and starting to act upon a framework that puts equity right at the center of it. Ironically, Queens County in New York City, one of the 5 boroughs, the borough I am from, the borough Donald Trump is from, is the only large county in America where blacks out earn whites. They earn more money a year than whites do per capita income. That's according to the New York Times. Those were stories done in 1993 and in 2006. So it's been like that for 30 years. Racism is not what is playing a part in poor outcomes as far as wealth generation do. Poor decision making is, especially when you're earning a solid middle class income every single year for decades. And especially when you consider the city has loads of numerous hiring quotas and welfare programs. Let's look at let's look at the program, the audit that was started under Mayor Eric Adams. It's a 375-page report. It makes it clear in that the state of racial disparities in New York City is rooted in, quote, settler colonialism, from 400 years ago, noting that, quote, New York City's history has been one of colonization, exploitation, and racial oppression. Somehow they are not including all the Italians and Irish who were oppressed in some certain decades of New York City's history. The report even states that the Native Americans are the rightful stewards of New York City. I want to remind everybody, New York City has not had a predominant Native American population in well over 400 years, but they are supposed to run New York City. Can we talk for a second about the infantilization of Native Americans by the left for a second? The left has this idea that they deserve really to own this country because they were here first. And yet, when you apply that same rationale, that same reasoning of people being in locations first, and therefore they should not be upended and rooted out and displaced by immigration, that's not okay. That's racism. It's only applied fairly to Native Americans and sometimes to other communities like black communities when there's a lot of whites who move in, there's gentrification, that's also bad. It's really whites that somehow miss this special status that Native Americans absolutely get, and once in a while is given to blacks as well. It's also never applied internationally. They don't talk about why Christians should, retake Constantinople from the Muslims who made it Istanbul. That is also a radical thought. It's kind of, but for Native Americans, it's a very mainstream opinion. It's extremely strange. Maybe they'll make that singer at the Grammys who announced that they were on stolen land as the head of this entire equity program. The one who wouldn't give up her house after the Native Americans asked for Billie Eilish, after the Native Americans asked for her house back, and she was like, "No, I'm not doing that." I love when liberals are caught in their own hypocrisy. Not that they care; they don't care about being hypocrites, but it makes me laugh. Okay, this is according to the American Mind. The premise of the program states this. It has numerous calls to action, including mandating anti-racism training for government staff and a fresh look at, quote, fine and fee-based programs for transportation to seek out racial and ethnic disparities. That is doing even less to enforce against subway fare evaders who are predominantly Black and Latino and who disproportionately commit other crimes on the subway. It decries the, quote, punitive policing policies that further marginalize Black and Latino communities, the very policies that drove the city's historic drop in crime under Giuliani and Bloomberg. My buddy Charlie Smirkley on Twitter, he's very, very smart, puts out a lot of data. He crunched the data on public welfare spending in New York City, and guess who doesn't benefit from it? Whites. When it comes to the public shelter program, the New York City spends $103 million every year on white recipients. They spend $864 million on Latinos and $787 million on Blacks. When it comes to education, 12 cents of every dollar spent on public education in New York City is sent to a white student. When it comes to Asians, they get 49 cents of every dollar. When it comes to Blacks, they get 62 cents of every dollar, and Latinos get $1.42 for every dollar spent. When it comes to shootings, suspects in New York City are 1%, or 1% of suspects of shootings are white. 1.7% are Asian, 29% are Latino, and 67% are Black. When it comes to public housing, 8 cents of every dollar spent is spent on a white recipient, that compared to 41 cents of every dollar spent to an Asian. $3.76 of every dollar spent goes to a black recipient, and $4.46 of every dollar spent on housing, public housing, goes to a Latino recipient. White New Yorkers are taxed at the highest rate per capita. They receive the fewest benefits. They have the most standing. Not today. This is today. This is not 100 years ago. This is not 50 years ago. This is not pre-civil rights. Today, the most amount of discrimination policies when it comes to government contracts and government hiring goes against white New Yorkers. It is an overwhelming discriminatory policy against one singular group. And that one singular group pays the most, gets the least, and is the most racially discriminated, and that's whites. And Mayor Mamdani's vision of this, his push of this, is married to his vision of cultural Marxism. This is what they did in Uganda. This is what many of his aides believe that they did successfully in South Africa, even though that country has fallen apart over the last several decades. It's a disaster. It's a failed state. But he doesn't see it like that. See, Mamdani's own father was stripped of residency and kicked out of Uganda because he was Indian, part of the British Empire at one point. And they were kicking out all whites and Indians because they did not have the rightful place. And they were pushing this left-wing racial equity program. Same thing happened to Kash Patel's father. Kash Patel's father said, wow, this is all bogus. This whole cultural Marxism, this whole racial equity program, it destroyed the country of Uganda. It took away all their success, all their people who were very forward-thinking, who were trying to create prosperity in that very poor country. And he took the lesson of, we should reject that. We should go towards the merit. Somehow, Mayor Mamdani's father, the victim of that same discriminatory policy, who is a college professor, doubled down. He said it was just done incorrectly, but we could do it better. Because the real enemy is just the white man. And we need to have this rainbow coalition that marries all these people together. I'm sorry, this doesn't work. It doesn't work on a numbers wise. It doesn't work ethically at all from the premise of what is right and wrong. It's very likely unconstitutional. I hope someone sues the city of New York. I mean, let me see how my lawsuit with Los Angeles goes first, and maybe I'll sue New York City. But it's incredibly discriminatory. It doesn't work ethically. It's against the principles of merit, and it's ahistorical from what's happening right now. They're getting so much welfare benefits, and it's not improving their lives one iota. I was reading something the other day that something like 1 in 5 New Yorkers, I might be wrong on the actual number because I didn't dive deep and I didn't do the research, so maybe this is off by 1% or 2, but 1 in 5 New Yorkers in New York City works for a nonprofit, and another third work for the city or live off of the city. So much of New York City is concentrated in non-wealth producing entities. Probably 25% produce all the wealth for the richest city in America. That's how important those people are to the engine that drives that city, the wealthiest and largest city in this country, wealthiest by light years compared to, Houston or Los Angeles or Dallas. Nonetheless, they are committed to discriminate against those people further, taxing them further, everything they can do to drive them out. And they'll probably do a wealth tax next. I'm waiting for Kathy Hochul support a wealth tax. The same thing that lost California almost $1 trillion in wealth. That is 100% what they're going to try to do, is what all these blue states are going to do. Push out wealth. Because the truth of this is money and wealth and prosperity goes where it's welcomed and stays where it's protected. It is not guaranteed. This is the concept that I think is missing so heavily from young people today. And I call myself, and I was young not that long ago, it was a few decades ago, but people assume that this fabulous nation of utter prosperity, relative safety compared to the world, especially to history. I mean, it's beyond safe compared to history, is the norm. And unsafe times and poor times and all the rest, that's not normal. When in fact, it is the very opposite. If you read about like the fall of Rome and what happened to, I mean, this is a long time ago, but the fall of Rome and what happened to what people lived on, or even the fall of communism in post-communist countries, how they lived. That was within my lifetime, and I'm not even 40 yet. The amount of poverty is jaw-dropping. What people did to survive was jaw-dropping. The inhumanity of socialism is jaw-dropping. It is a failed idea that's going on all over Africa, all over Latin America, and Mayor Mamdani's coalition is convinced that they could bring it to New York City, but make it work sometime. Mamdani constantly says, "Oh, it's Denmark with just brown people." That is not. That's not. Denmark is unique because it is the size of Arby's. It has 35 people, 29 of which are white, working Denmark natives with high social trust, huge levels of prosperity, low levels of relative illness. It's a unique thing that is not compatible with the entire world. And ultimately, Mamdani's version of cultural Marxism, of this socialism, is rooted in anti-white racism. That is the modern day belief of the left. They're going to tamper that down come the 2020 election. They're going to say, no, 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 we really don't believe this. They really, really, really do. They really, really, really believe in this anti-white racism. And you could see this in Virginia, where the first bills out of the state legislature were, let's prevent white people from getting government contracts. Let's make sure that white people's lives are worse off. Let's make sure we discriminate against whites, because that's what makes us feel good in our grand scheme of things. And to all these white New Yorkers, a lot of them are hipsters and yuppies, and they live in the communist corridor, and their parents are paying their bills. Good luck to you. I mean, you don't produce wealth anyway because you're probably working for those nonprofits. But if never mind, I thought of a really, really off-color joke that I'm not going to say. But that is absolutely the case. And if you are a wealthy person and your kid is a shit lib communist, you should not be paying their bills. You should 100% not be paying their bills. I don't think that this audience is there, but if you are that person and your kid is like this, you should not be paying their bills. I have right-wing family members whose kids are left-wing lunatic nutbags, and they pay all their bills. And I want to scream into the abyss. It's not going to do anything, so I just let it go. But that is the case. Anyway, all right, next up is Ask Me Anything. All right, now it's time for the Ask Me Anything segment. If you want to be part of the Ask Me Anything segment, email me, Ryan@numbersgamepodcast.com. It's Ryan@numbersgamepodcast.com. Got a lot of judiciary questions after my Supreme Court episode. I'm doing more research. I'm going to skip a few of them for this episode. I'll come back to it on Monday's episode because I want to really give you guys a deep dive on your answers, and I don't think I'm there yet. So let's go to the answers I do know a little bit about. One is of the Supreme Court. It's from Joel. He writes, what if the court rules narrowly that Trump doesn't have the authority to change citizenship policy via executive order, but then drops a broader constitutional bombshell? Specifically, what if they say the current interpretation of the 14th Amendment is wrong and that the subject to the jurisdiction thereof applies only to U.S. citizens and legal residents and their children, not to people who are citizens of other countries who happen to give birth on U.S. soil? That would avoid giving the new executive power while still resettling the constitutional baseline and then kick the issue to Congress to sort out. I know that would cause massive disruptions, but given the court's track record, it's not completely out of bounds. Wait, is it completely out of bounds? Sorry about that. Or at least within the realm of possibility. Yeah, I think that's completely possible. I mean, I'm not a legal expert as far as what the court does and doesn't do and cannot do, but it is not, I mean, a lot will rest with Barrett, a lot will rest with Roberts and their decision making on it. But if they want to do that and say this is not how the original interpretation of the 14th Amendment stands, as I believe, then yeah. I mean, ultimately, if they rule, it would be better if they did not rule on the executive order, if they ruled on the standing of the Constitution. Because if they rule on the executive orders can be overturned by the next Democratic president. It would be better if they said the president does not have this executive order, but that the Constitution does interpret it as the correct way. That would actually be the best, because it would mean that another president cannot undo it vis-a-vis executive order, and it would be a longstanding precedent. That is what I'm hopeful for. Actually, I think it's possible. I'm praying that Roberts and Coney Barrett make the correct decision on this. I mean, this would be transformative. If this happens, I don't care if Trump sleeps 18 hours a day like my dog. He will go down as one of the best presidents in history. Undoing this is so critical, and it means that it lasts much longer than just this presidency. Okay, next question comes from R. Shannon. He writes, I thought Eric Swalwell didn't have a California residence. Never mind the Fang Fang. Fang Fang was the alleged Chinese spy he was having an affair with. Did he just make up one? Also, how come we allow stuff like this? I guess the big question is, why do we mock kangaroo court counties, but we act like this shouldn't happen? Okay, so what R. Shannon is talking about is there is a comment by Tom Steyer, the Democrat also running in the California governor's primary, that states that Eric Swalwell wrote on legal documents that Washington, D.C. is his permanent residence. I don't think this is going to hold water. I think this is more of a negative attack line against Swalwell than it is actually a way to get him off the ballot. Swalwell's picking up a lot of endorsements and a lot of union support and a lot of money. I mean, Steyer has all the money in the world, so what does it matter? But on that front anyway. But I think this is his way of saying Swalwell actually doesn't even belong in the state because he lives in D.C. and he actually doesn't show up much to Congress either. So I don't know what he's doing. I mean, I've heard allegations, but when the allegations against Swalwell drop, I'll give you guys the inside scoop that I've been hearing for a long time about this guy. Not always a gentleman with the ladies. Anyway, so if those allegations do drop, we'll talk about them. But this is really a campaign ploy than it is a right reason to get him off the ballot, because Swalwell does live in California. He has a residency there, but his permanent residency is in D.C. Most congressmen and senators spend more time in their DC offices and their DC homes than they do in their district homes. If that were, I mean, I know of senators who represent the Midwest and live in Florida most of the time. They have a post office box. So it's very common, and I don't think it's going to get Swalwell off the ballot. Okay, last question comes from Junipero. I don't know if I pronounced your name correctly. If I didn't, I'm sorry. I realized I'm pronouncing a longtime listener's name incorrectly who writes me all the time. So sorry to you too. You know who you are. I responded via email. Okay. Hero, congrats on being able to listen to modern music again. Thank you. Lent was very tough. I will not be giving up music again. And thanks for answering my last two emails. I was speaking to a Wall Street bond manager, and he noted despite Trump's successes, the future is bleak. He specifically cited the wealth transfer, young to old, white to other groups, men to women, post-hard seller demographic transformation, staggering debt, and the Union Party's willingness to permit some form of balkanization. With that in mind, what is your predictions for American life in the next 20, 50, and 100 years? Okay, Junipero. I mean, like, I took an IQ test in high school. It was 142. I'm a decently smart person. I have no idea what life is like in 20, 50, or 100 years. My impending death is the only thing I know is going to happen in that time frame. And like, I am by nature, I try to stay optimistic by nature. I'm a natural pessimist. I mean, I'm Italian from New York. Our family, it just, you know, that kind of dynamic makes you a pessimist. There's no other way to say it. You know, if I were to call my like a female relative in my family, it's, you know, the conversation naturally goes over, do you remember so and so? And I'll say no, and they say, well, they're dead. That is a natural, normal conversation that I have on nearly a daily basis whenever I contact a woman of a certain age within my entire Italian family. So I have no idea. I'm not going to pretend that I know. I think life lasts long, things change. If you are a pessimist, if you are a naturally pessimistic person like I am, I think it's important to remember no matter how bad things ever look, they have been worse at other times. Think about the Spaniards living under Muslim occupation for 100 years, 200 years, whatever it was, before the Christians retook Spain. Think about what the people fighting in Vienna were like when the Ottomans surrounded Vienna and were starving them to death, and the Polish army came and saved them. I mean, there have been so many times in history that things have looked bleak and dark. The Black Death, freaking COVID. Like, I mean, that wasn't anything like the Black Death was, but there have been times where things have looked bad, really, really bad, and they got better. So don't despair. Black pilling and despairing is the worst thing that you could do. I tell everybody the same thing all the time. You can only do what you can with what you have. You can't do more. So do the most you can do. And then that's enough. And that really is enough. Live a good life. Try to be a mentor. Try to be someone, a role model. Try to be somebody to look up to. Try to make money. Try to have a nice family and have a nice meal, an Italian meal. I gave you guys my sauce recipe. I don't know why you're not making it. Actually, people have emailed me and said they made my sauce recipe and they all loved it. So I appreciate you guys. But that is really what it's about. I don't know what 50 to 100 years look like. No one does. No one's got a crystal ball. Don't listen to them. Just try your best and be an active member of society. And that's all you can ask for. And no matter what, the arc of history is very, very, very long. And hopefully Jesus comes back in the end and all our souls are saved. And that's that. So I don't know. That's the ultimate white pill. But do your best with what you have. Anyway, thank you for listening to this episode. I hope you guys have a great Friday. If you like this podcast, please like and subscribe on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, wherever you get your podcasts, and on YouTube. I'll be back on Monday. Hope you're back with me too. I'll talk to you guys then.